but I do appreciate those that came out tonight. I want to thank Chazaq, first of all, for giving us the opportunity and sponsoring the food and the shir, and also Torah Anytime for putting the shir online. I just want to mention that I myself actually pushed the flyer for this Chaburah, and I actually send the video out of my own Chaburah to people. And I feel bad when I do that because it almost feels like I'm promoting myself and I want to promote myself. I really don't want to bother anyone else to do it, and I do it because I love the preparation that I put into it and the Torah that I learn, and I just want to share it. So I feel that just for the fact that I'm sharing Hashem's Torah, I feel honored that I can post it, and I feel honored that I can send out the flyer because I want people to benefit, I want people to enjoy, I want people to see the greatness of Hashem, the greatness of Torah, the greatness of tzaddikim, the stories we say over. So I just thought I wanted to mention that. No one said anything to me about me posting it. I just, every time I do promote and put on my status and I keep promoting it because I really want people to enjoy Torah, and I want them to really have hana'ah, enjoyment from it. Okay, so last week we discussed Haggadah Shel Pesach. I said some stories, I said some nice divrei Torah. Today we don't have time for that because we have a lot to accomplish, and this might be probably the last shir before Pesach, because next week, Wednesday night, is Pesach, and Tuesday night is the night of B'dikat Chametz. I don't live in the neighborhood, I have to travel, I might be needed Erev Pesach. I would try to maybe see if I can do it maybe Tuesday night. I don't know if you're available Tuesday night, but like I said, I don't do it just for the people, I do it for myself, the preparation. So I would just anyway maybe make a video and send it out. But I do recommend that you listen to the shir first part again, and write down whatever you'd like to be able to use for the Pesach Seder. Like if you're in America, if you're going to be in America for Pesach, you have 2 starim. So you got to balance where you don't say everything that first night and left but nothing the second night, unless you just want to rush it up. But you have to learn that you get excited. You got to know, put some aside for the first night, put some aside for the second night. So if you go over the shir from the first one, plus what we'll go tonight, I do believe that there will be a nice balance that you could share some the first night and some for the second night. But I will go through very quickly many points that I want to bring down. And like I said, if you can go over the shir slowly and write down, so you can come prepared for your family to enjoy, also to show the father relationship with the family that he says beautiful divrei Torah over, if you don't have your own. Okay, so let's just go back on 1 or 2 things. Maybe I mentioned it last week, maybe I didn't, but I'm just going to do like around 15 bullet points in around 20 minutes of time, and hopefully you'll really enjoy and you'll really come to the Pesach Seder with a deeper understanding and appreciation for the long night of the Pesach Seder. The pasuk says, "V'higadat lebincha," that you have to say over to your children the inyane, the Pesach, the Seder, go through the Seder with them. So from that word, "V'higadat lebincha," we know the word magid, which means the Haggadah, which means to say over. Rashi says the word "V'higadat lebincha" teaches you the word Haggadah. What's Haggadah? Almost like stories, midrashim, parables, to excite your children. The key is to excite your children in the story of Pesach, so they will be entertained, they will be interested, and they will be made clear of what happened. So Rashi says again, the word V'higadat also comes from the word Haggadah, which means to say over stories and divrei Torah that stir and pull the person in, pull the child in. Okay, now we do know that there is a chiyuv to actually remember the night of Yetzias Mitzrayim a whole year. Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim, we say it in Shema, we say it in different places, we say it during the year in Kiddush, many times, but especially once a day at night, during day and at night, we mention Yetzias Mitzrayim. So why is Pesach different than the regular chiyuv of saying over Yetzias Mitzrayim? So I saw 2 answers on that, and one answer is that on a regular night, the chiyuv of a person or the day is to just remember Yetzias Mitzrayim, just to mention it. But on the night of Pesach, the chiyuv is to discuss it. And which way to discuss it? Through question and answer format. So there's really more of a chiyuv of discussing it, not just mentioning it. The other nights of the year, mentioning; the night of Pesach, to actually discuss it. Also on the night of Pesach, I saw another answer, is that the night of Pesach, you just don't talk about the freedom. You don't just talk about the leaving of Mitzrayim. there's a chiyuv to actually talk about the shibud, the slavery of Mitzrayim before the freedom. Now the famous question is, why should we mention slavery at all? If it's a night of freedom, or if it's like somebody's anniversary or somebody's birthday, we'll use anniversary. You don't celebrate the anniversary by telling your wife how difficult it was, Shana Rishona, or how difficult it was till this anniversary. You want to only bring up the good points of where you are right now. You're celebrating an anniversary. So why mention the slavery when it's bringing up only negative, bad connotations and not feeling of freedom on this night? So I just want to mention that it's brought down a deep concept of the night of Pesach, which is, in order to appreciate true freedom, you need to know your humble beginnings. You need to know where you came from. You need to know the difficulties that you've been through in order to truly, truly appreciate the freedom that you have. In order to appreciate the freedom, you need to know where you came from. You need to know what got you here. You need to know the Avodah Zarah, believe it or not, that we discussed, that we did when we were a young nation, before we even became the nation we are, with Terach Avraham and the slavery and how we worshipped other idols. We need to mention that. We need to mention that in order to understand how far we have come. And when you know how far you've come, that's when you could start to really, really appreciate where you're at. So even a person that makes a lot of money, made it big, it's very important sometimes that he remembers when he didn't have that money. It's very important that he needs things to remind him that when things were not going his way, because then you'll have a greater appreciation. So that's regarding the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim at night. Now, there's a question that's asked, why is there no bracha before we say the Haggadah Shel Pesach? No bracha. Every mitzvah we know, pretty much, has a bracha before it, right? Especially a night like this, especially such a long Haggadah Shel Pesach, there should be a bracha. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kidishanu b'mitzvos tzivanu l'saper b'yetzias Mitzrayim. But there's no bracha on the Sipur of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So I actually saw 4 answers to that. I'm sure there's many. I just want to mention before I even go into those answers. Every time I give you an answer, 1 or 2 answers, there's probably 20, 30 answers to every question. I just picked a few. I picked things that I think are relevant. I picked things that I can actually understand. But there's a lot of talk that could be spoken about in every question that's asked. And the real Lamdisha people, they go into different inyanim. I have a sefer, Darshan B'She'elah. It's an unbelievable sefer, and he goes through all the raid and all the different chidushim and questions with different rishonim and achronim. That really a lot of beautiful stuff. But I have to actually cut everything down to a half hour, 25-minute slot. So I pick 1 or 2 that I find easy to understand, and that I could just give it out to you. So again, why is there no bracha for the Haggadah Shel Pesach? So the Rif actually says that there is a bracha. The Rif says there is a bracha. Where's the bracha? When we make kiddush on the first cup, we say Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. He holds that in a way is the bracha for the Haggadah Shel Pesach. By mentioning in the first cup of kiddush, which is not a separate Kiddush, it's part of the Seder, it's the beginning of the Seder, and it's the first of the 4 cups, so therefore it's not just a random we make Kiddush like we make Kiddush on every Yom Tov, which we would have to do anyway, but it's part of the Haggadah Shel Pesach, it's part of the Seder, and therefore that bracha of Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim, the fact that you say it in Kiddush, is the bracha. The Rashba learns that there's no bracha for a different reason. He learns that there's no bracha when it comes to the Haggadah Shel Pesach, because a mitzvah that does not have a set amount, he holds you don't make a bracha on. It's called davar she'ein lo kitzvah. Something that does not have a set amount, there's no bracha. And he says that's why kibbud avayim, there's no bracha, because there's no limit. It's limitless, kibbud avayim. There's no set amount. Tzedakah, there's no set amount. I mean, you give meiser, but regarding the giving of tzedakah, there's no set amount. So you don't make a bracha on things that have a set amount, or that do not have a set amount. You do not make a bracha on. So that's the second answer that's given. Another answer I saw is that being that we start with slavery, the beginning of the Haggadah is about slavery, right? Therefore, there's no bracha. There's no bracha when it comes to talking about the slavery. There's no bracha. Therefore, being that we start with slavery, we don't make a bracha. But at the end, when we discuss all the greatness that we've been through and all the Hakaras HaTov we have to have for Hashem. At the end, we have a bracha called Goal Yisrael. So Goal Yisrael takes over. Instead of the beginning bracha, it's the end bracha of the Sipur of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of the Haggadah of Pesach. Another answer I saw, and this the fourth answer, is mitzvah sichlius, a mitzvah that is common sense. To appreciate what Hashem did for you is common sense. For some reason, I don't know if this is universal, if this is a fact by every mitzvah, because some mitzvahs I understand the sichlius too, but I'm not this huge Talmid Chacham that can answer such a thing, to go through it all. But a mitzvah that's sichlius, a mitzvah that's understandable on one person's own understanding, through his own understanding, there's no bracha on that. That's what he says. This Mefarish said that mitzvah sichlius, there's no bracha for. Okay, now, how do we start the Pesach Seder right away? Halach ma'anya, this is the poor man's bread, okay? So there's a lot of questions on this. There's so much stuff just on this little piece on halach ma'anya. I'm telling you, we could spend hours on it. But question number one is, the halach ma'anya little piece in the Haggadah, that's 4 or 5 lines, is actually in Aramaic. It's not even in Hebrew. And the question is, if the whole Haggadah Shel Pesach is in Hebrew, why is this little section in Aramaic? Why is it in Aramaic? 4 point. What's the reason? So, like I said, there's many answers to everything. I'll mention just 2 answers that I saw. One answer is that really we're talking the Haggadah Shel Pesach people weren't living in Yerushalayim. It was really when there was a Churban, right? Because we say L'Shana Haba Yerushalayim. So it was really after the Churban Bet HaMikdash, the Haggadah Shel Pesach, right? We do things that we did during the Bet HaMikdash, but the Haggadah took place in Galut. And most people were in Bavel. And their language they spoke was Aramaic. Therefore, we want the children and the wives who may not be so learned. People were not learned like today. You didn't have books today. Women didn't go to yeshivot. So people were really, whatever their husband taught them, that's what they knew with a little bit, and they didn't learn on their own. It's only the last 100 years that women even had girls' schools in Sarah Schneer, and that was even questionable if women should even learn Torah. We're not getting involved in that right now. But women did not know a lot, and therefore they needed to be told a little bit about the beginning of the matzah, L'Shana Haba, some basic things. So we did it in a language where women and even little children would be able to understand in the Galut. And being that most people were in Bavel, they were out of Yerushalayim. Therefore, we do it in a language that they should know. Your question should be, so why don't we do the whole Haggadah Shel Pesach in that? Because there's a Mesorah to do it in the Lashon that it was written in, the Lashon that we were taught, and then you explain it, Okay, now why is it called the poor man's bread? Why is matzah called the poor man's bread? So like I said, many answers. I'll just mention 3, 4. I also made a joke about this 2 weeks ago, that it's called the poor man's bread because it's so expensive that when you finish paying for it, you have no money left. So therefore it's called the poor man's bread maybe. It's just a joke, but I just thought, just a little milsa b'dechusa to get people to laugh a little bit, I guess. Anyway, the real reasons why it's called the poor man's bread is because poor people, the matzah is a type of food that a poor person will make and eat. Why? Because it digests very difficult. To digest matzah is not as easy. Therefore it stays in the stomach longer, and therefore also it fills you up for a longer period of time. So a poor man, people in those days were poverty stricken to the point where they didn't even have money for wine, for matzah. So a person would make a kind of bread called a matzah, when he had no money, because it would last longer, and the ingredients were just flour and water. You make challah, you need eggs, you need this, you need sugar. I don't know what you put in. Now they have the special crumbs that they put on top, the sugar crumbs on it. I mean, who knows what, it became a delicacy already. But challah, as a general rule, has more ingredients. Therefore, it costs more. And people were so poor that the matzah, because it's just flour and water, was a poor man's type of bread. And like I said, also it's harder to digest, and therefore it lasts longer, so a poor person would stay fuller longer. So that's another reason why it's called the poor man's bread. The Gemara says a reason why it's called the poor man's bread. I should have mentioned the Gemara first. In honor of the Gemara, the zchut of the Gemara, it says, Lechem she'onin alav dvarim harba. It's a bread that many answers are on it. What does that mean? That answers and questions that people ask at the Pesach Seder, the matzah plays a big role. whether it's breaking the middle matzah, whether it's kids taking the matzah or pointing to it or getting involved or talking about it. The matzah is one of the main characters, if I may say, or actors in this Pesach Seder. Therefore, it's lechem she'onin alav dvarim harba. A lot of things are answered through this matzah. And I wanted to be masber a little bit. What does that mean? And something I thought of lechem she'onin alav dvarim harba. It could be the Mefarshim do mention this. I don't want to give myself too much credit, but I just think that's also part of the pshat of lechem she'onin alav dvarim harba, because we know that we recline by the matzah. We know that it's a symbol of, in a way, freedom. In a way, it's expensive. You feel, we recline, but in reality, the matzah is slavery. The concept of the matzah is slavery. This is the matzah we ate in Mitzrayim because of the digestive issues. It's brought down that the Mitzrayim actually did give Klal Yisrael matzos during Egypt, and the matzahs we made on Pesach are a different matzah, obviously, but it was only because we were in a rush. So we're taking credit for the rush that we did it and running to do Hashem's Ratzon, when in reality there was matzah in a certain way being given to us in Mitzrayim anyway. So the fact is, the matzah is slavery, but at the same time it's freedom. It shows us, it's called Chag HaMatzot, like we discussed. Hashem calls it, the Torah calls it, the holiday of Matzot, which is freedom. So this contradictory understanding is actually the basis of the Pesach Seder. It's the basis of the Pesach Seder. We know that when the children ask the question, Ma nishtana, what lies behind those 4 questions? Very interesting. What lies behind these 4 questions? That these are the 4 questions that are asked. So if you really look at the Ma nishtana, it's broken into 2 different groups. 2 of them are regarding slavery. Why do we eat chametz and matzah, and tonight we only eat matzah? And why do we dip, other vegetables, and or not even vegetables, and on the night of Pesach we dip maror. We take maror and we eat maror. Slavery. Those 2 are questions of slavery. Yet, there are 2 that are freedom. Reclining, and the makbilin, the dipping. Actually, the other thing is shaya rakot, other vegetables. The dipping, which is freedom. We dip twice, freedom-wise. So the question of the Ma nishtana is really the child wondering what's going on here. Is it a night of freedom? That we mentioned 2 of them that are free, right? The reclining and the dipping. Or is it a night of slavery, that we discuss our slavery, which is the chametz umatzah and the maror. So that's really the basis of the 4 questions. The child is wondering, which one is it? Is it freedom or is it slavery? And therefore we tell him, Avodim Hayinu, that really we need to talk about the slavery and then the freedom. It's both. And if it's really acted out well, like I said last week, I know people that actually buy these little frogs and makot, and a whole theatrical program that they run here regarding the Pesach Seder. If you have little children, I would recommend it. I would recommend it because it gets them excited, it makes them stay longer. If you want to let them keep some of those little, these things that people bring random things. People get dressed up at the Pesach Seder. I'm serious. I know somebody that dresses up in certain makot. He goes into his room, comes out as a frog. One time he comes out with different things. I really hope he doesn't come out as makat b'chorot. But in general, they dress up and they like to excite the kids. So that's beautiful. That's wonderful. That's getting the kids engaged more than actually focusing it on your personal enjoyment at the Pesach Seder. Not about you. It's about the children. Even though there's a chiyuv on a person, if he doesn't have children, he should still say the Ma nishtana, and he should still say everything in the Haggadah Shel Pesach. So that's something else I wanted to mention. I did mention also the kol dichvit and kol ditzrich of halach ma'anya. What does that mean? We say at the Pesach Seder, the doors are locked, usually I hope, the windows are closed, the shades are down, you're sitting with your family, it's 8, 9 o'clock at night, and you make an announcement. Kol ditzrich, yesev yechel, kol dichvit, kol dichvit, yesev yechel, kol ditzrich, yesev yifsach. We say things inviting people. We're inviting people to this Pesach Seder. No one's hearing it. No one's around. No one's coming in for that announcement you make quietly at your Pesach Seder. So who are we referring to when we make this announcement? It can't be to the people outside, because an announcement like that should be made earlier in the morning, right? Or put up flyers, send out emails, send out to people. There's no emails in those days. Send out information to people, come to my house for Pesach Seder. Why are you making an announcement like that at that particular moment? So I saw 2 beautiful things. One thing is that we're not talking to outside people when we invite people to come that are needy and hungry. We're inviting the people at the Pesach Seder. We're saying all of you that did not eat the whole night, the whole day, because you wanted to come into the Pesach Seder hungry so that you could have the matzah b'tei avon. For those people, we're inviting them that they should come and partake in this. You are worthy to come and partake because you prepared yourself. By not eating, you're needy, you're hungry, so let's come and celebrate the Pesach together because you showed the love for the mitzvahs of being hungry so you could actually, a Yom Tov anyway, you're supposed to go into a Yom Tov and Shabbat, not eating before so that you can come in to enjoy the meal. So you're coming in with a spirituality of preparing yourself. So we're inviting those people. A friend of mine, his name is Ben Weinstein, a student of mine, friend, said to me something last year that I thought was very telling, and I actually thought about it during the course of the year, and I couldn't wait till I give a shir on the Haggadah so I could say it over. He said to me, and I did see it actually, just recently somewhere printed, actually, some Rishon brings it down, and he says like this, he says that the reason why we went down to Mitzrayim was because of the hatred that the brothers had for Yosef. The sinat chinam that the brothers had, the sinas achim that the brothers had towards Yosef, is what really caused us to go down to Mitzrayim at the end of the day. Therefore, we want to show ourselves and HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we understood that message, so we make a random announcement. Whoever is needy, whoever is hungry, come and partake. Because we want to show that we're going to show ahavat achim, the love of other people, that it's not about us, it's about other people. So the announcement is not for actual people, but it's for actually yourself at the Pesach Seder. So we're actually showing that the mistake that was done then, we realize what it is, and we're going to correct it by showing that we understand that we need to invite, we need to bring other people, whether it's the relatives at the table, whether it's yourself, that you're understanding the concept of what it means to give and to have ahavat achim. So that's a nice answer. I like that. I thought that's what I saw. Now, it also says, Haggadah to Lebincha, we mentioned that you should say over the Haggadah, we said Rashi, Aggadot, that it should be in story form. Why is it in a question and answer form? Why can't it just be, I say random stories, and I say random divrei Torah? Why does it have to be, and it does have to be, pretty much in a question and answer, let the child ask, let you answer, let the child ask, and you answer. Why? So as a teacher, as a Rebbe for many years, I can honestly attest that when a child asks personally something, and you get an answer, whether the answer is even better if he didn't ask, if you just even an answer that's not great, but because he asked the child, he feels, hey, I'm part of this. I'm involved more. It was my good question. So he'll accept the answer, much, much greater because he was involved. So when a child asks and he's involved, instead of you telling him, he will accept and he will listen and he will try his best to understand the answer because it was his question. But that's just on an understanding answer. There's an actual pasuk that tells you, that we learn out from, that you should ask questions and answers. Because it says, V'hoya ki yishal bincha. It will be on this night that your child will ask, and therefore we learn from that words yishal, that it should be in a question and answer form. V'yigadata, you should say over, but in what way? V'hoya ki yishal bincha. It will be when your child asks, which means try to get the kid to ask. In other words, do things that he should ask. And most of the things that are done, if not all, of the things that are done at the Pesach Seder, dipping and Seder and reclining, is all to make things different. So a child who's in tune, a child who's aware, will actually take the time to say, what's going on here? What's going on here? What's going on here? We even put away the afikomen and we hide it, and the child should take it, only because he should get involved. We want him to stay, and therefore we only eat it at the end of the Pesach Seder, so that he should stay through the whole night, till the end, pretty much. So he should be involved, waiting to bring the afikomen, which means he has to be at the table. That means he has to get involved. So, like I said, everything is about the children. And I did mention last week, I'll mention again, for a few years, my kids were younger, I would actually come home from shul. I had a few guests waiting. They didn't have to wait that long. Anyway, they were schmoozing a little bit. And I would do a half hour, 45-minute Seder just for my children. I went through everything they did in school, their Haggadahs, their books, their Manashtanas. And I did a small Seder with 4 cups of grape juice within a half hour, 45 minutes. So they got what they needed to get was a Pesach Seder. And only then did I actually make my own Seder. So let's say I got them at 8 o'clock, 8:10, and then 8:10 to 9 o'clock, we did a Pesach Seder. 9 o'clock is when most people start anyway, till everybody fights about where they're sitting at the table, and this guy got insulted, this guy got jealous. Why is he in the front? Why am I in the back? Why can't I sit next to my husband? It takes him 45 minutes, at least I witnessed it, till everybody got settled. So those 45 minutes, me and my wife, we would sit, we would do a Pesach Seder, and then we'd either put them to sleep, they were very young, or they lingered around. But I know I was at least Mekayim the night of Pesach, doing what I felt was for the children. So that's something else I wanted to mention. Now, to a Chayris. Now I saw something else very interesting. There's a remez I saw of the two dippings that goes back, not just two dippings, just dipping in the matzah, in the karpas and salt water, the maror and charoses, but there's a bigger significance in the dipping. That the first time that actually something was dipped that we know about in the Torah was when Yosef's brothers took his coat and dipped it in blood. They dipped it in blood, and because of that was the snowball effect that made us go down to Mitzrayim, that we ended up in Mitzrayim. Therefore, what do? We do a second dipping. What do? We do the azov, the haisap, and we dip it into the blood of the Korban Pesach to show that we did something against the will of Hashem by doing what we did to Yosef, by dipping his coat in blood, and now we're misakein. We fix by understanding that we're going to do a mitzvah through our dipping, which is a dipping which Hashem told us to do anyway. The haisap, that type of leaf or whatever it is, into blood, so that we're misake and we fix a little bit the mistake that was made by the brothers by showing we're going to do a different dipping with kedusha and holiness and for the purpose of a mitzvah. Okay. Now we do know another thing I wanted to mention. It says Chacham Mahu Omer, the four sons, right? We talk about the four sons. It says Chacham Mahu Omer. Chacham, what does he say? Rasha Mahu Omer. Rasha, what does he say? Right? The question is, what is the lashon Mahu Omer? It should say, what does he say? It should say Chacham Omer. It's not what does he say. It's not a question. Chacham Mahu Omer, and then we say what he says. No, Chacham Omer. The Chacham says. The Rasha Omer. The Rasha says. What's Mahu Omer? So I remember this for years growing up. It's a beautiful Dvar Torah. I just remembered it now as I'm giving this Chaburah. The Chacham, how do you know who's a Chacham? How do you know what a Chacham is? Mahu Omer, what comes out of his mouth. From the way a person talks, it tells you a lot about that person. When the way there's gentleness, the softness, Chas v'shalom, Lashon Hara, whatever it is, the way a person talks, he identifies himself to you, what he's all about. Therefore, Chacham, how do you know who's a Chacham? Mahu, what is he? Chacham Mahu, Omer, what he says. The Chacham, you'll identify him, Mahu, who he is, Omer, what he says. The Rasha, you'll identify him by his roughness, by his negativity. Rasha Mahu, who is he? Omer, what he says. What he says identifies who he is. Now we do know that the Chacham and Rasha actually say pretty much the same thing actually. The wording is pretty much the same wording. The only difference is the Rasha doesn't use Elokeinu, he doesn't say us, he says you. The fact, and this is what it says, the fact that he exempts himself from the community, the fact that he takes himself out of the community, that is the biggest wickedness that a person can do. When he acts like he's indifferent, when he acts like it's not about him in a bad way, it's all you. It's all you. You have to do. I'm out of this. Keep me out of this. The fact that he takes himself yotza atzmo min haklal, that is the worst rishus that a person could do, because if you're not part of a community, then you have a much greater difference. It's going to be that much greater for you to get back in. You need to be involved in order to have a chance. Because if you're involved, even if you're not doing what everybody else is doing, but the community itself can one day turn you around. The fact that you see good can turn you around. It's when you're on your own on an island in life where that's when you have a much greater difficulty in coming back. So therefore, the Chacham and the Rasha pretty much are saying the same thing, except the Chacham actually includes himself with his questions. It's not about you, it's about us. And the fact that he excludes, the Chacham uses the word Elokeinu, which means Hashem. So that also is another great sign of the difference between the Chacham and the Rasha. Does anyone know what time is it, please? What time is it?
9:23.
Okay, another 5 minutes and then we'll stop. Okay, there's so much to say. I only did through, I would say, 1/3 of what I actually prepared, but whatever we have is good. Whatever, the more Torah, the better. Now, I will tell you, the Vilna Gaon says, there are 4 types of people that have to bench Gomel. There are 4 types of people that have to praise Hashem, to bring a carbon when he's able to, for things that happened to him that could have been a disaster situation, a situation of bad happenings to him, and because he went through them, he has to thank Hashem. Today we bench Gomel. In the times of Beis Hamikdash, you would bring maybe a carbon toda, a carbon haudah. So, what are the 4 things? Number 1, someone who's sick that was healed. He has to bench Gomel. He has to say Haudah. Somebody that travels across a river has to also bench Gomel because something could have happened to him. A kitrug, the Satan could have caused him to get judged during these times and all these 4 times. And therefore he needs to thank Hashem that he wasn't judged unfavorably by the Satan, by his actions, and therefore he thanks Hashem for delivering him. Also somebody who was freed from prison. And a 4th one is someone that travels through a midbar, through a desert. Those are the 4 types of people that when they go through these 4 different situations, they have to, like today, bench Gomel, or they have to, and they have to give Hodah, thank you to Hashem. So the Goyen says that these 4 are what Klal Yisrael went through during the Shibud Mitzrayim. All 4. They were sick. They needed 40 days to heal themselves, and they got healed by Har Sinai. But from all the suffering, like sitting like almost a concentration camp, they actually went through. They needed to be healed, just like the inmates they needed to be healed for years, not just emotionally, physically healed. So Klal Yisrael were freed, and they got healed by Har Sinai. They traveled across the Yam Suf. That's the second thing. They were freed from actual bondage, slavery, freed from prison. And the 4th is they traveled through a midbar, which Klal Yisrael did do. So therefore, all 4 Klal Yisrael needed to thank Hashem for on this night of Pesach. All 4 are things that Klal Yisrael witnessed and went through, and therefore they need on the night of Pesach and through life to thank Hashem for that. I did mention also a little bit last week, we discussed the 5 Tanaim and Amoraim that sat the whole night in Bnei Brak, and they said over the Pesach Haggadah, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yeshua. They sat through the night and they said over the Pesach Seder. Through the night they discussed Yisipur Yitzias Mitzrayim until the Talmidim came and said Egiya Zman Kriya Shema, until the Zman of Kriya Shema took place. I'm just going to make a joke. I don't usually make jokes during my shiurim, but I want to get people excited a little bit. It's more of a yeshivish kind of joke, but they actually asked, why does it mention that it was in Bnei Brak? Why does it mention, and I love Bnei Brak, so I'm just a joke. So you say, why is it only in Bnei Brak that the Haggadah likes to mention that these 5 Tanaim and Amoraim were sitting and they spoke about Pesach Seder and they spoke about the Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim till their Talmidim came and said Egiya Zman Kriya Shema. Until Egiya Zman Kriya Shema, until the time of Kriya Shema. So the joke in the yeshiva world is that only in Bnei Brak could a Talmud have a chutzpah to tell his Rebbe, Egiya Zman Kriya Shema, what are you doing? It's Zman Kriya Shema. It's arrived. Like you can't, you got to telling him what to do. So that's just a joke. But anyway, in reality, why does it mention these 5? There were many Gedolim. I'm curious to know, and I'm sure there are people in Eretz Yisrael, in Lakewood, or maybe even in Flatbush Borough Park, Queens, I don't know, but I could see it in Eretz Yisrael a little bit, I could see it in Lakewood maybe. The people that stay up a whole night, I'm sure there are people that stay up the entire night discussing the Haggadah Shel Pesach, discussing different Torah and Chidushim. There's definitely, I'm sure Chaim Kanievsky, randomly every night he stays up. So my brother stayed up many nights of the week. I've stayed up when I was growing up, sometimes Thursday nights, the whole night. Many nights I would end up staying up through the nights when I was a bacher. I wouldn't say when I got married that much, but when I was a bacher, there were nights I stayed up and learned through the night. So I'm sure there are people that have done it, and I'm sure there are people that still do it, families that sit through the night. I'd love to know about it, if anyone knows of a family that has done it, but I just think it's very impressive. Usually people come the next day in shul, and the first question, it could be middle of davening even, what time did you say that? And when did you say that? And you make up some time that you fell asleep, you sang songs, the wife ends up singing the songs, it's not the point. But I'm sure there were other people that stayed up a whole night and have done it. Why does it pick these Tanaim and Amoraim? So they say over that Rabbi Kiva was a ger. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, they were Kohanim Leviim, these Reb Tarfon, right? Yet they were never slaves. They were never slaves. They were never slaves. Yet, Rabbi Kiva was never a slave. The Kohanim Leviim, like I mentioned before, Leviim didn't have to do avodah ever in the slavery in Mitzrayim. Yet they stayed up a whole night. They stayed up a whole night and discussed Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. So if they could stay up, what is our obligation? I didn't say to stay up a whole night, but what is their obligation to spend a little more time, to say a little more Divrei Torah, to make sure you're awake at the Pesach Seder? If they did it through the night, yes, they were very holy, and they were very big tzaddikim, we get that, but they weren't even, according to their status of who they were not even mechuyav maybe, because they never went through it. So that's something that we learn out from that. I just want to mention there's a bunch of questions actually that I have not on the Pesach Seder, not on the Haggadah of Pesach, but there's questions that always I try to understand the answers. I've not come to some of them with the clear answers to, but one of the questions I had was why the 4 cups of wine, which I mentioned before the shir even began, the 4 cups of wine are an inyan of freedom. V'tzeisi, the 4 lashonot, v'tzeisi, v'lakachti, v'ga'alti, that a freedom, right? So the 4 cups of wine are actually inyani of cheirus, of freedom. Yet, I know by the Sephardim, especially by the Sephardim, if a person has red wine or white wine, really you should always take red wine. But if the white wine, by the Ashkenazis, and this is what I learned, if the white wine is more expensive, if you find it to be a better wine, then yes, you can use the white wine instead of the red wine. But I know the Sephardim, they hold that even if the red wine is cheaper, much cheaper than the white wine, you should still use red wine. Now, I know the inyan of red wine is, like I said, we recline by the wine. You're supposed to recline. If you don't recline, you have to drink another cup, make another bracha maybe. It's shy to make another bracha, but you have to drink another cup, right? Yet, we know that the red wine is an inyan of cherut, of freedom. So the real question is, if the red wine is cherut, we know that you take red wine because one reason it's brought down because of Paro who bathed in the blood of Jewish children. So we want to remember that. A second reason is because the Makkah of Dam, we want to remember that. Now these are all negative things. The bathing of Paro in the children's blood is not something we celebrate. It's something we went through. It should be part of the slavery, not the freedom. That's part of our enslavement and not our freedom. So the question is, so why would we use red wine for reclining with the 4 cups of wine, which is the lashonot of Geulah, when there's suffering involved? That's one of the questions. Matzah, another question. Matzah is slavery. It's not an inyan of freedom. Yet, we recline by the matzah. We must recline by the matzah. The maror we don't recline. There's 2 reasons. One, because of health. But the other reason is because it's bitter. It's a negative thing. It's slavery. We don't recline by slavery. So why are we reclining? Why are we reclining? Why are we making the wine, which is red and which is negative? Why are we reclining by matzah, which is slavery, and we're trying to show freedom? There's a lot of twists here where we see different inyanim, where it's slavery and freedom at the same time. Another question, and we'll answer most of them with one answer. It says, a person has to imagine that he left Mitzrayim, but not just imagine. Chiyuv, he has to almost, there's a chiyuv on a person, lirois, to envision himself that he left Mitzrayim. How can a person that's never been there, he doesn't even know what it's like, envision what it's like to be as if he is in Mitzrayim and he's leaving? Secondly, even if a person went through Mitzrayim, years later, he forgets to a certain degree. It's not the same level that he can envision that he was there. I know when I get a stomach ache, the pain is unbelievable. The next day, you remind, I remember I had a stomach ache. It's not the same. It's not the same as you experienced it at the moment. So how could there be a chiyuv on it? So there's a lot to say over. I'm just going to mention something and then we'll end here for now. Maybe I'll have another share on Tuesday. At least maybe I'll make a video of it. We'll see. But there is 2 types of freedoms a person has to. I saw this from different places and I spoke to different people and they explained this to me. There's 2 types of freedoms on that night. There's a freedom where you left Mitzrayim, you tried to envision that. But then a person has his own personal Mitzrayim, his own personal enslavement, that he should somehow tap into on that night and try to bring himself to a level where he feels freed from that entrapment, from that enslavement. Therefore, a person Therefore, a person has not just the shibud of the Mitzrayim in the past, but the shibud of his personal Mitzrayim that he has at the moment. So we encompass both of those, we try, and that a person can do. A person can envision himself leaving a suffering or a difficulty, and that's why we try to come spiritually, getting rid of the chametz, the enslavement of the Yetzer Hara, to the Pesach Seder, so we can truly feel free, not just free from Mitzrayim, that we weren't there, but free from our own personal Yetzer Hara. That's what we said 2 weeks ago. The chametz is the symbol of the Yetzer Hara, and we clean it, and we try to get rid of it, so we can come truly free, not just Mitzrayim, not just regarding Mitzrayim, but our own personal enslavement and personal problems that we have, so we can feel truly free that we're able to do the mitzvot of that night. That we're able to serve Hashem, and therefore, when you do that and you get rid of that those Yetzer Haras that a person has, that ta'avot that a person has, the difficulties that he has, then Hashem says you're ready to do more mitzvot. You're ready to do more mitzvot. So I give you all the bracha, including myself. The next year we should be giving this year, hopefully with all of you in Eretz Yisrael. That doesn't mean I'm paying for your tickets. Mashiach doesn't come, but I will tell you that next year we should be zocheh to celebrate with the real Kabbalah Pesach, with the Haggadah Pesach, with the understanding and the meaning of the present galut that we live in. Will be a memory. Will be something that will be part of our shibud. Will be part of that. Oh, look, we didn't even realize how enslaved we were to our own galut, into our own exile, and we should understand what true freedom is. Have a wonderful Pesach, a wonderful Shabbat, and thank you all for coming.